It was supposed to be a fresh start. My family had finally moved into our dream home, a quiet, well-kept neighborhood run by the local HOA. We hadn't even finished unpacking when a white SUV rolled up, windows down, and a woman with a clipboard gave us that look. You know the one? Within 20 minutes of stepping onto our own front lawn, the HOA president was already on the phone with 911, claiming we were a threat to the community. No one knew our names. No one had even said hello, but somehow she decided we didn't belong. The police arrived faster than we expected. Sirens off, but tension high. We stood there stunned, wondering how welcoming a few boxes and a moving truck had turned into an emergency call. My kids watched from the porch, confused, as this woman tried to get us removed from our own property. But what she didn't know, what would flip the entire situation upside down, was who I really was, and who I knew. This wasn't just about an entitled HOA Karen. It was about power, assumption, and a serious case of the wrong move at the wrong time. What happened next left the entire neighborhood speechless, and her walking away in under 20 minutes. You're not going to believe how this ends or who had the last word. Stick around, because this story is just getting started. Keywords: HOA Karen. Family moves in. Police called by HOA. Neighborhood drama. Moving day chaos. HOA gone wrong. Entitled neighbor. The moment we pulled into the driveway, I could feel eyes on us. It wasn't just a neighborly glance. It was that lingering stare that made you feel like you already did something wrong. The house had passed inspection. We had every document lined up, and our name was on the deed. Still, that didn't stop a group of HOA board members from gathering at the corner like they were planning a sting operation. The woman who eventually called 911, everyone in the neighborhood just called her Karen, showed up not long after we opened the moving truck. Clipboard in hand, tight smile, she walked up like she ran the place. Without even introducing herself, she pointed to our truck, asked where our permit was for commercial parking, and demanded we keep the noise down, even though it was barely noon on a Saturday. I explained calmly that we were simply unloading furniture. No music, no loud talking, just a regular movin'. But something about us didn't sit right with her. It escalated fast. Karen mumbled something into her phone, stepped away, and 5 minutes later we saw a cruiser slowly creeping down the street. My wife looked at me, concerned. My kids stopped unpacking. The neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, but didn't say a word. It felt like we were on trial. We didn't even know the charges. She had no clue who she was messing with. I hadn't even played my hand yet. Asterisk, asterisk keywords. Asterisk, asterisk, HOA, Karen. Moving day drama. Police called on family. New neighbors conflict. HOA, discrimination, suburban tension. HOA, abuse of power. The officer stepped out of the cruiser and walked up slowly, hand resting near his belt like he expected trouble. Karen rushed to meet him halfway, waving her arms and pointing back at our house like we were running some kind of operation. I stayed calm, wiping the sweat off my hands on my jeans, and waited until the officer approached me directly. He asked if I was the homeowner. I told him I was, and added that I had the closing documents in the glove box if he needed proof. Karen interrupted, saying we were disturbing the neighborhood's peace, claiming the moving truck was too large, that our children were being loud, and even tossed in some wild comment about too many relatives being around. My wife shot me a look that said she was about 2 seconds from losing her cool, but I held up a hand. I knew the game. What she didn't realize was that I had grown up in neighborhoods just like this, where rules were bent based on who you weren't. But this time, I wasn't just another new face on the block. I had spent the last 20 years in law enforcement. Meanwhile, our oldest son overheard a couple of teenagers snickering from a porch nearby. HOA is going to make them sell, one said. That's when I realized this wasn't just Karen. It felt like a setup something deeper. Maybe this HOA didn't want change. Maybe they didn't expect someone like us to push back. Keywords: HOA conflict. Police involved in HOA dispute. Unfair HOA rules. New family targeted by HOA. Suburban drama. Moving day confrontation. The officer looked from Karen to me, his expression unreadable. I could tell he was trying to figure out who was telling the truth. Karen kept tossing out terms like violation, unauthorized occupancy, and disturbance of HOA regulations. But the officer asked her calmly if she had documentation of any actual rule we'd broken. Her response: "I'm on the board. That's all the authority I need." That's when the tension shifted. The rest of the neighborhood started watching. Curtains parted. A few neighbors came out with their phones, pretending to water their lawns but recording everything. My kids had gone quiet, sensing the mood had changed. My wife stood beside me now, her hand gripping mine. But her eyes were locked on Karen. She wasn't afraid, she was angry. I stepped forward and asked the officer if we were being charged with anything. He said no, just a call to check things out. I then calmly told Karen, in front of him, that our property records had been filed and cleared with the county and the HOA president himself. That's when her eyes twitched. She mumbled, "He doesn't run the board anymore." Just as an older gentleman came walking briskly down the street, Mr. Glenn. The very HOA president she'd just tried to dismiss. Karen's face paled as he approached. He glanced between her and the officer, then looked at me. I was wondering when someone would finally stand up to her. The crowd was silent. Something was about to change, and everyone knew it. Keywords: HOA confrontation, HOA board. Abuse, neighborhood drama, new family versus HOA. HOA president exposed, suburban tension. Unfair HOA treatment. Mr. Glenn turned to the officer and calmly asked, "Did she mention she's been removed from the board?" The officer raised an eyebrow. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mr. Glenn continued. "She was voted out last month for misuse of HOA funds and harassing residents. The paperwork's been filed. She has no authority here." A ripple went through the crowd. I could hear someone whisper, "That explains a lot." But just when I thought the storm might pass, Karen snapped. "That vote was rigged. He's just covering for them." She pointed at us, then looked the officer dead in the eye. "You need to check their background. You don't know who they really are." That's when things took a sharp turn. The officer, clearly over the drama, turned toward us and asked for ID. I handed him mine. I studied it longer than I expected. His brows furrowed, and he tapped something into his tablet. Karen crossed her arms with a smug look, as if she'd finally caught us. But then the officer looked up at me, slowly. "Sir," he said, "why didn't you mention your position?" With the sheriff's office, Karen's face crumbled. The crowd gasped again. "You're the liaison chief?" he asked. I nodded. Karen took a shaky step back, visibly rattled. But before anyone could speak again, a sleek black car pulled up across the street. Sharply dressed woman stepped out and locked eyes with Karen. "We need to talk now." And just like that, things weren't over yet. Keywords: HOA, abuse of power. HOA drama escalation. HOA corruption twist, neighborhood showdown. HOA president confrontation, hidden identity reveal. Suburban HOA tension. Karen stiffened the moment she saw the woman approach. Her name was Marisa N., internal auditor sent by the county to investigate a string of complaints about HOA misconduct. Turns out, Karen had been under quiet review for months, and our call today just helped seal the deal. The officer stepped back as Marisa pulled out a folder and handed Karen a letter. Karen's hands trembled as she read it. her jaw dropped. "You can't do this," she whispered, but her voice was hollow now. Marissa spoke calmly but firmly. "Your misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized fines, and harassment of residents have violated multiple regulations. You're being removed permanently, and charges may follow pending final review." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who once stayed silent now whispered, some even pulled out their phones. Karen turned toward me, eyes wide. "You set this up?" she spat. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The truth was louder than anything I could have said. The officer handed her back the citation she tried to use against me, now voided. "You're not in charge anymore," he said flatly as Karen was escorted to her home to collect her things. The crowd began to disperse, some clapping softly, others just shaking their heads. But just when it felt like everything had ended, Marissa pulled me aside and said quietly, "We need to talk about the property across the street. There's something bigger going on than you think." And just like that, the real story had only just begun. Keywords: HOA corruption exposed. HOA president removed. Neighborhood justice. HOA internal audit. Suburban HOA drama. Power abuse consequences. Over the next few weeks, things in the neighborhood finally started to feel normal. Again. Without Karen patrolling the streets or issuing bogus fines, people began to relax. Kids played outside without their parents looking over their shoulders. Flags went up, porch lights stayed on, and everyone started talking again like an actual community. It turned out several board members had quietly resigned once the audit began, and a new, more transparent HOA leadership team stepped in. Focused on fairness and rebuilding trust.